Philosophy Club. We're going to continue our exploration and adventure today and try and handle at least the starting point for grasping metaphysics. We talked about first principles last time. I used the metaphor, the analogy of being lost someplace in a labyrinth and how you could figure out where you were, and that exploring not just the things around you, but the nature of the things around you could help you determine where you were. Well, in essence, that's a distilled idea of metaphysics. I'm trying my best to keep this short, so I cut out a lot, and I struggled immensely with producing a script or having clear-cut definitions or anything like that, and I found that just every time I started getting something organized, it led me down another rabbit hole, and then another rabbit hole, and then another rabbit hole, as often happens with philosophy. So I'm probably going to catch some flack if some actual philosopher sees this and takes umbrage with some of the things that I'm saying, but I got to cut corners somewhere to make it fit. So let's get into it. What is metaphysics? Put simply, this is the easiest way I could find to get us started thinking about it, is metaphysics is the study of the nature of reality. Physics might seek to describe an object. What is a thing made of? How does it interact with other things, etc.? But metaphysics would seek to understand the deeper nature of a thing. What does it mean for a hat to be a hat, for instance? Not just what material is it composed of, but layers of value and meaning, how you interact with it, what is its function. All of those tend to be a deeper exploration into the nature of the thing. Which leads me to part 2 of our definition, that metaphysics is concerned with the fundamental nature of being. What does it mean for something to be? And this is where I ran into a little bit of issues, because a lot of the metaphysician philosophers that I read to try and prepare for this kept hearkening back to the ancient Greek philosophers in their exploration of the first cause of things. And this is where we have to kind of cut some corners, but let's complicate this a little bit more. If we want to be technical, metaphysics is primarily concerned with the first causes of things, being as such. What does it mean for something to be? And or unchanging things, also called universals. This is interesting because using that last definition, we can look at science itself as at least engaging in metaphysical practices, if not utilizing its own metaphysics. For example, the Big Bang is a first cause for all physical matter in the universe, as far as how we understand and recognize it today. Pre-Big Bang, we have no idea what was happening. We can make just very uneducated guesses, but as far as all of our scientific astronomical data tells us, everything is reducible to the Big Bang as a cause for our universe to be in existence. Secondly, the concept of an atom, first proposed by Democritus, I believe, was originally conceived as an unchangeable object, undivisible, not able to be divided anymore, unchanging. And lastly, existence itself is characterized by a series of natural processes. So the nature of being, right, is changed through these natural processes. We can call them metamorphosis, we can call them digestion, we can call it diffusion, osmosis. There's all sorts of rational scientific claims that try to explain that. But what matters is, if we zoom back out just a little bit, that it can be encapsulated by this idea of metaphysics. So I struggled immensely with trying to figure out where to start. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of philosophers that hearken back to the pre-Socratics in their exploration of the pre-scientific description of things. But I figured we would start at Socrates, as most do. There's a reason why everybody before Socrates is called the pre-Socratics. He tends to be the linchpin in the formulation of philosophy as we know it. Interestingly, though, Socrates is a moral philosopher. He engages in ethics, a little bit of epistemology as well, but most notably not a metaphysician, or at least classical interpretations of him suggest that. However, I did find a couple sources that produced some interesting claims that there is an underlying and unspoken and hidden metaphysic in Socrates' work. For example, in the dialogue Protagoras, Socrates demonstrates conversationally with Protagoras himself that virtue is composed of numerous constituent parts. While he's exploring virtue as a moral or ethical issue, what's important to point out is the metaphysical claim that Socrates is making that a thing can be composed of other things. It can have constituent parts. The nature of being as such, then, according to Socrates, is that it can stack and compose new being and new things. Additionally, Protagoras further admits through Socrates' line of questioning that the constituent components of virtue are not distinct, but are in fact similar. Some would argue more similar than dissimilar. What does it mean for a thing to be a distinct and independent thing, then? Is there anything that is truly distinct? How can two things be the same yet different? This question will be a nice starting point for next time when we explore Socrates' most famous student, Plato, and his theory of forms. But before we go there, there's a couple things that I need to point out. Firstly, that all of the historical, quote-unquote, evidence that we use to understand Socrates as the person and the philosopher are written by other people. Socrates, notably, never wrote any of his works or ideas down. This puts us in a bind, because how authentic then are these ideas to be attributed to Socrates? To some degree, it doesn't much matter because the inherently biased sources that we have are the only sources that we have. So it might be splitting hairs trying to figure out where the real Socrates is in this and where the overly romanticized or demonized, depending on the source, Socrates might be. The second thing that I want to reiterate is Socrates' claim that a thing can be composed of constituent parts, meaning that something that is can combine with something else that is to make a new thing. Secondly, that those constituent parts are more similar than dissimilar. Before we rationalize that claim away, let's think it through really quickly. Science suggests that while my phone and myself might be two unique and distinct individual things, if we increase the resolution down to the atomic scale, the fundamental building blocks for both my phone and myself are the same. Maybe not the same individual things, if there is such a thing as that, but same in nature, same in being, same in interaction, predictably. That's kind of the whole point of chemistry, is to be able to classify these foundational and fundamental elements based on their qualia into separate distinct categories. But even then, those things are composed of further constituent parts, subatomic particles, protons, neutrons, quarks, positons, etc. And all of those things seem to be made of the same things. Let me give you another example to see if we can kind of clear this up, and then I'll call it a day. I have two hats. Two individual in distinct hats. What makes them different? They're both composed of thread. They both serve the same function. They're both the same shape. While there might be some small differences, color, this one might have plastic on it. For all intents and purposes, they're composed of the same things. They do the same function. They are the same thing. Then what does it mean for them to be different? How can I hold two of them if they're fundamentally the same thing? That's when we'll get into Plato's forms, because as far as I can tell, Plato took Socrates' ideas of constituent parts that are similar, creating something that we interact with as distinct and unique. And he furthered that and developed what he would call his theory, officially his theory of forms. And I think we can use his allegory of the cave to get there, but we'll save that for next time.